Fiji's presidency of this year's United Nations Climate Summit has put a renewed focus on the future of low-lying Pacific islands. And while we should not ignore the plight of these nations, it is just as damaging to assume that their fate is already sealed. Many people in Australia consider island nations such as Kiribati, Tuvalu and the Marshall Islands to be almost synonymous with impending climate catastrophe. After returning from Papua New Guinea in 2015, Federal Immigration Minister Peter Dutton infamously joked that time doesn't mean anything when you're about to have water lapping at your door. If influential and everyday Australians, and the rest of the world, hold the view that Pacific Island nations are doomed to succumb to climate change, the danger is that this will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Read more. Australia doesn't get the environmental challenges faced by Pacific Islanders. When we deny the possibility of a future for low-lying small islands, we are admitting defeat. This in turn undermines the impetus to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and find ways to help communities carry on living in their island homes. It leaves us unable to discuss any options besides palliative responses for climate refugees. There are other consequences of this pessimistic framing of islands. It may undermine efforts to sustainably manage environments, because a finite future is anathema to the sustaining resources in perpetuity. It can also manifest itself in harmful local narratives of denial or self-blame. And it can lead to climate change being blamed for environmental impacts that arise from local practices, which then remain unchanged. We would do well to listen instead to what the leaders of low-lying island nations are saying, such as Tuvalu's Prime Minister Ilie Sopoaga, who told the 2013 Warsaw Climate Summit. Those sentiments were echoed by the late Tony D. Brum, former Foreign Minister of the Marshall Islands and described as the voice of the Pacific Islands on climate change, who said in 2015, "Determined to survive." These leaders are determined for good reasons. Small islands are likely to respond in a host of different ways to climate change, depending on their geology, local wave patterns, regional differences in sea level rise, and how their corals, mangroves and other wildlife respond to changing temperatures and weather patterns. Evidence suggests that even seemingly very similar island types may respond very differently to one another. In many cases it is too early to say for sure that climate change will make a particular island uninhabitable. But perhaps even more important in the future of low-lying small islands is the way people adapt to climate change. There are all sorts of ways in which people can adapt their environments to changing conditions. Indeed, when the first migrants arrived in the low-lying atolls of Micronesia more than 3,000 years ago, they found sand islands with no surface water and little soil, and settled them with only what they had in their small boats. Modern technologies and engineering systems can transform islands even more substantially, so that people can still live meaningful lives on them under changed climate conditions.